Out of all the planets in the solar system, you may know Mercury a lot more than the other planets, especially because you've probably heard of Mercury retrograde. Now, because Mercury is an inner planet and it's so close to Earth compared to the other planets like Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, ancient civilizations knew about it and they saw it with the naked eye. So Mercury has been an influence on our lives since 1500 BCE. Mercury is named after Mercury, the messenger of the gods, and that's endured the test of time. We still know Mercury as the messenger planet, okay? The planet of communication. And so Mercury today, it represents everything that has to do with communication, whether it's writing, whether it's editing, speaking, contracts, negotiations. It also rules travel and shipping. And that is why we may have some moments when Mercury does go retrograde, because it really does have an impact on communication. And it brings, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of frustrations, a lot of delays, a lot of like, right? And listen, this has been going on since the ancient civilizations. They went through this all the time too, okay? So first things first, let's get this clear out of the way. Mercury retrograde happens 3 to 4 times a year, about 3 weeks at a time. That's why it may feel that it happens a lot more often than you would think, okay? It's, just consider it maybe like every season. And I'm gonna explain to you the main things that happen during a Mercury retrograde and the 4 things that you probably should not do during a Mercury retrograde. And when I talk about frustration, delays, and confusion, this is all under the umbrella of communication. I said that word weird. Communication and travel. Now, when I say retrograde, a lot of people get really confused. They think that the planet goes backwards or it goes in reverse motion. It actually doesn't. It's an optical illusion. So this is flight delays. This is missing emails. This is sending emails you shouldn't. Important texts not going through or you not receiving them. Your Wi-Fi could go out. You could have major miscommunication with a friend, boss, lover, family member. A lot of technology could go a little haywire at this time because it's communication. We're talking about missing flights, your Uber not arriving on time, and maybe interviews just not going the way that you had planned it in your head. You know, those fish aching moments, right? Those fish aching moments, and you just have to grin and bear it. So if you are watching this video now, Mercury goes retrograde from August 23rd to September 15th. However, there's something called shadow period, and it happens before any retrograde and days after a retrograde. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's just still, it's kind of like the build up to the Mercury retrograde. So Mercury went into its shadow on August 4th. So you're probably already feeling little moments of, hey, missing emails, phone is not working the way it's supposed to, or maybe you planned a brunch and nobody came because you sent out the email on the wrong day. Things like that. What makes this Mercury retrograde really, really intense is the fact that half the solar system is already retrograde, okay? A few days after Mercury going retrograde, Uranus is going retrograde. A few days after that, Jupiter is going retrograde. The only planet that's going to be in full motion is Mars. So during these retrogrades, this is a big retrograde period. This is one of the biggest Mercury retrogrades of the year. In fact, of many years. Almost the entire solar system is taking a nap, which is kind of like retrograde periods, right? Things are not moving as fast as you want them to. But also, Venus retrograde is overlapping Mercury retrograde. And this is a really big thing. Venus is also another inner planet, so you feel it more than you would feel like, Uranus retrograde. So when I say retrograde, just think of these planets in their weakened states. But with Mercury retrograde, it's almost like he's a little trickster and playing these fun tricks on you to, get a little laugh out of how you're going to handle these, you know, frustrations and delays and whatnot. So with Venus and Mercury retrograde at the same time overlapping, you will be doing a lot of reassessing. These retrogrades are a window to the past. They really are times where it's a good time to go back to things, to really reassess them, to rethink them, to, you know, even have this you know, reignite that fire. Like if you were writing a book and you stopped writing it, this is the time where you may feel inspired to pick it back up. If you hadn't heard from a friend in a long time, this is a great time to pick up the phone, if it works during a Mercury retrograde, and get in touch with that person. Again, Mercury retrograde is a time to not initiate anything, but to rethink things, okay? Especially with matters of communication. If Venus is retrograde, that's matters of the heart. I did a video of things not to do while Venus is retrograde, which I'll leave the link up somewhere around here. But Mercury retrograde is more matters of communication. It's a little bit more matters of the mind. So keep that in mind, huh? So when you smush Venus retrograde and Mercury retrograde together, there could be a lot of rethinking in terms of the way that you communicate and your relationship with love, relationships, money, creativity, but also, again, just anything that has to do with communication or travel as well, okay? And again, it's not the best time to travel because Mercury is in weakened state. And so back to the shadow period. So that really is the best way to describe it. Is just like things are a little foggy, okay? We haven't really hit the retrograde yet, but things are starting to get a little foggy, okay? Your blinders are they're working, but still it's a lot of fog. Now, here's the good news. This Mercury retrograde is actually really good. It's really great. I love this retrograde, and I'm going to do a video on how this Mercury retrograde is going to affect all 12 signs, so look out for that. That'll come out soon. In the meantime, I'm just going to let you know now, Mercury is the ruling planet for Gemini and Virgo. Yes, it rules 2 signs. And so if you are Gemini, or if you are Virgo, if you're Gemini rising, if you are Virgo rising, you are definitely going to feel this retrograde period the most. But Mercury is retrograding in Virgo this time around, and Mercury is in its domicile and it's exalted in Virgo. But what's making this retrograde period really nice is all the aspects that's happening during this Mercury retrograde period. And again, I will talk more about that in the video that I make for all 12 signs. And yes, Mercury retrograde affects everyone differently, every sign differently. Hey, it's a thing. It's a thing, and everyone's going to feel it. Every sign is going to feel it in a different part of their life. Now, my intention for this video is to help you work through Mercury retrograde, not make you fear it. But at the same time, remember, I did say there are great things with Mercury retrogrades too, so always look forward to the great benefits that do happen with Mercury retrograde, which I will again discuss with the other video. I like this Mercury retrograde, and I feel that a lot of signs will actually benefit from it. I will tell you the 4 things that you probably shouldn't do during a Mercury retrograde, 4 things that Mercury retrogrades are notorious for. And I'm actually going to give you, just like I did with my Venus retrograde video, I will give you some concrete examples. I'm going to give you very extreme examples, okay? And a lot of personal examples, especially because I'm actually Gemini rising and I'm Virgo moon, and my Venus is in Gemini too, actually. So Mercury retrogrades do affect me and have a big impact on me. So I definitely have those moments when Mercury goes retrograde, but also those great moments. Number 1. I think the most obvious thing and the most cliche thing that you've maybe heard of is try not to travel during Mercury retrograde. Again, Mercury rules travel. Listen, if you gotta go, you gotta go, right? Just Mercury retrograde is known to throw those curveballs and Mercury wrenches in your plans, travel plans. So this is everything from flight delays to, again, like I said, missing. Maybe you booked a car, doesn't show up. Maybe you got to the hotel and they didn't have your reservation. Maybe there's just all sorts of communication issues that could happen. And the reason why the travel thing is super don't do it. Is because remember what I said, Mercury retrograde has, it brings those moments of like, frustration and whatnot. And travel is a force of good. You're going on this vacation. You want to have this wonderful, great time, but it's just like, it's like frustrating. It's like if you book a trip to Tahiti and it rains the whole time, like you're not going to be happy, right? Mercury retrograde does not bring bad weather, by the way. That's just like an example that I'm giving. So here's the good news is that you can, sure, you can travel during Mercury retrograde. More power to you. More power to you. I've gone on trips during Mercury retrograde and without any hitches, okay? Without any hitches. If you travel during Mercury retrograde, the chances of any sort of communication or delays or frustrations are a lot higher during those periods, okay? Now, here's the latest example that I can give you of what happens during a Mercury retrograde. Mercury was retrograde December 29th, 2022 to January 17th, 2023. So just recently, okay? Now, if you remember, over 4,500 flights were canceled on New Year's Day. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people were left stranded at airports and cities and wherever for days. According to the New York Times, U.S. flight cancellations hit a peak. And this was one of the most notorious Mercury retrograde travel experiences that like thousands and thousands and thousands of people had. I mean, knock on wood. I've gone on trips where I have been during Mercury retrograde where I was surprised things were seamless. However, I have gone on trips where things were not fun. It was not fun. Not fun. The more that you mentally prepare for the fact that you are going to be traveling during a Mercury retrograde and anything can happen like that time, the less frustrated you may be. Okay? That's how I approach it. Number 2, don't launch anything. This is whether press releases or maybe even products if you're with a company or if it's something that you're going to start. Again, Mercury rules communication, and so communication or reaction from the public could backfire, all right? From March 12th to April 4th, 2012, Mercury was retrograde. Google Glasses launched on April 4th. And those dates of when the Mercury retrograde begins and ends are the strongest, okay? You feel it the strongest around those times. Not even, those are the peaks of the dates that bookend the Mercury retrograde. But again, the pre-shadow, like a day or two before, you'll still feel it. You'll feel it, all right? Google felt it because the glasses just did not do well. Speaking of dates surrounding Mercury retrograde, start and ending dates, April 9th to May 3rd, Mercury was retrograde. A few days before, there was a commercial. It was a Pepsi commercial. There was a celebrity in it. I think you know where I'm going with this. It was pulled very fast. There was a really big backlash to it. There was not a lot of people were happy with that commercial. That included someone that was pretty famous at the time, or maybe still, maybe. But again, there's that sense of communication of reaching this broad audience, and it just backfiring. Mercury retrograde, March 12th to April 4th, 2012. If you live in the New Jersey, New York City area, you will remember Revel Casino, a $2.4 billion casino, and it opened to the public on April 2nd. That is a launch that did not go well. The casino did not do well. It went bankrupt about as soon as it opened. It did not last long. And it made even national headlines. October 30th to November 21st, 2019. Do you remember what was launched around that time? Apple launched AirPod Pro, October 30th, 2019. After it launched, there were many issues with the AirPod Pros where it had to be recalled, and a lot of customers, actually all of 2020 basically, people were sending them back because there were sound issues. October 13th to November 13th, 2020. Apple launches iPhone 12, another product that was recalled because there were just so many issues with it. And Apple actually launched a repair program for the iPhone 12. Speaking of phones, do you remember when the Samsung Note 7 kept catching fire in August 2016 when it was released? Mercury retrograde up until September 22nd, 2016, and Samsung did a hard recall on September 15th, 2016. And those are just examples to give you context of what happens when you launch something during a Mercury retrograde. It's always, again, I'm not saying that you can't launch something during a Mercury retrograde, but when it has something to do with, in terms of communication, and we use phones to communicate, it may not go in your favor. But any sort of launches that involve any sort of communication, like a PR release or, or a press release or something that's making this big announcement, you may want to avoid those times because, again, Mercury retrogrades are just peaks at these times throughout the year that you want to avoid that because Mercury's a little trickster. He wants to pull the rug from under your feet. He likes to be naughty during the retrograde period. Remember, humankind has experienced frustrations, delays, confusion, all of that during Mercury retrograde period for over 1600 years. Now, the last thing that you want to do is sign a contract. I am going to give you one big example. We're going way back with this one. This is one that I remember specifically, okay? And that's why I'm bringing this one up. March 20th to April 15th, 2005, Kmart and Sears merged. It was an $11 billion merge, a deal with these two brands that were struggling at the time. And they officially merged on March 24th, 2005 during a Mercury retrograde. So there was a signing of a contract during that time. And Sears actually ended up losing $7 billion. You don't want to sign contracts during a Mercury retrograde. Now, I signed a contract to work with a company during a Mercury retrograde. Now, here's the thing. I had no choice. I had and you'll find yourself in that situation. Sometimes you don't have a choice but to travel during this time. You don't have a choice but to make an agreement during this time. But this was one of those times where I signed the contract for this new job that I really wanted. And there was, I couldn't ask them, hey, can we wait 3 weeks to sign this contract? Do you know what I mean? Like, I couldn't do that. They would go with another applicant. So I had to sign the contract, okay? And I knew at that time, because I was signing during a Mercury retrograde, that job would not last, all right? And it didn't. And the reason why is because during the job, about 3 or 4 months into my role, all my responsibilities and the duties and everything that I signed up for started shifting. Communication. And so, again, I did not last long. However, here's the silver lining. The job that I have now, I never would have gotten had I not worked there. The CEO of my current company saw my resume, saw the company that I had been working at, the brand that I had been working at, which is, she thought was very impressive. And that's the only reason why that I have the full-time job that I have now. So there's always, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. There's always a rainbow after the rainstorm. And number 4. Don't buy anything related to communications. Hey, you can. You just may have some glitches. You may have buyer's remorse. You may have... you may end up returning it. And when I say buy things like electronics, it really is like phones or maybe like a router or maybe a computer. Maybe hold off if you can. The craziest example I have was literally last year. It was one of the roughest retrograde periods that I'd been going through. I had driven home to see my family in Georgia on a road trip. On the way back, I stopped in Asheville, North Carolina, and I dropped my phone. It was going to be about 4 more days until I got back to New York. I had to just get a new phone. And so I went to the Verizon store. I bought a new phone, and that was that. It was during Mercury retrograde. What I didn't know at the time was that the contract that I signed for this new phone put me in a new plan that raised my plan another $20 that I could not get out of because I signed for 2 years. At the same time, later that day, I learned that it was just my screen that was cracked. So I could have just paid $300 to get the screen fixed, and I would have been fine. So you see how that involves electronics, buying expensive things, contracts, travel. But again, Mercury retrogrades affect everyone differently. So, hey, and I came out just, hey, I got a new phone. So there you go. Again, there are so many great things with Mercury retrogrades, okay? So many great things. And again, I'm going to next week post a video for all 12 signs, what you can expect for Mercury. I'm going to talk more about this particular Mercury retrograde period that's coming up. Again, Mercury retrograde in Virgo in its domicile and it's where it's exalted, all right? During the time overlapping Venus retrograde. This is such a unique thing with 4 other planets retrograde at the same time, but there's so many great Mercury aspects that are happening during this Mercury retrograde. I actually do like it. I'm not gonna lie. It's like you won't even mind if you are going on a trip and traveling and there is little glitches here and there. You won't even care. I mean, this is one of those Mercury retrogrades that's actually really nice. I like what's going to happen here. I'm just giving you the biggest examples, but they're not, Mercury retrograde isn't something that you should be afraid of. And it's not something, again, like I said, there's so many great things to Mercury retrograde. But yeah, it is known for thousands of years to have a little bit of add a little confusion and frustration to your life. But if, hey, it may not affect you as much as you think it will, especially this one coming up. But if you can avoid those 4 things, you'll be fine. You'll be great. Okay. But again, if you have to sign a contract, if you have to travel, if you have to launch something, you can't wait, just go ahead and do it. Don't be afraid. Just know that maybe a couple things may change, may shift. The examples I gave you were just really extreme examples, okay? Things it may not be that bad. And again, like I said, I've traveled during Mercury retrograde without any hiccups, There's probably times in my life where I've signed things during Mercury retrograde and things were fine, So it really just depends on a lot of other elements that are happening during that time in terms of astrological aspects and, your energy as well. And I talk about your energy and how you handle a situation and, keeping your gratitude high throughout the whole time. Just grin and bear it. Flash or smile. If your flight is delayed for your next trip during a Mercury retrograde, think about all the fun things that you can do while your flight is delayed, right? Always look at the bright side of things. And with that said, thanks so much for tuning in. And don't forget, I will be doing reading for every sign and what every sign can expect during the retrograde, because every Mercury retrograde affects every sign differently, okay? So thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye-bye.